And that is not quite unanimous. It's 10 for, against, abstentions. 1 abstention. Thank you very much. But that is carried and we'll go from there. So thank you very much. That completes the traffic items for the report. Thank you, Jan, for attending. Very much appreciated. And we'll just have a little bit of a pause while the officers change places and we move on to the planning agenda. Okay, no problem. I think we've got the IT set up. We've just had a pause while the planning officers move, while the traffic officer moved over, and we now have planning officer in place. And indeed, we've set the technology up to allow for people to join us through the Teams section of this too. So we're now moving into the planning part of the agenda, and we have one item to discuss today, and that is item 6. S20/1351, which is King Street at Grateford. So the batting order for this will be Neil McBride, Head of Planning, will outline the report. Item 2 will be, the second part will be Simon Tucker of David Tucker Associates will attend via Teams and speak in support of the application. Third one will be Vanessa Smith will attend to speak in an objection to the application, again via Teams. Number 4 will be Councillor Ashley Baxter, who will attend via Teams to speak to the item. Number 5 will be Councillor Gemma Taylor of Grateford Parish Council, who will speak to the meeting as the local elected member, which we can allow on planning applications. Of course, it must be remembered we don't allow people to speak to traffic items within the agenda as the Constitution currently sits. Item 6 will be committee members will speak, officers will respond, any motions will be moved and seconded, and if we have any amendments, they will also be moved and seconded. So, part of that schedule, 9 items. Item number 1, pole position. Mr. Neil McBride, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. And I'll also just introduce John Sharp, who's Principal Highways Officer. So John will be able to assist us if there's any technical questions regarding the highway aspect of this proposal. So just to refresh councillors' memories, this application was first brought to the Planning Committee back in the 5th of July, and at that meeting there was a resolution that councillors undertook a site visit to understand the environment and in particular the local highway network before being able to reach a decision on this application. As we heard at the start of the meeting, the site visit took place on the 29th of July when members were able to look in more detail at the site and the local highway network. So before you today, there's a supplementary report which brings together the application in terms of confirming the application detail, and that the basically updating the position since the previous report was before the committee on the 5th of July. So just quickly going through the supplementary report, you'll see there that various issues that were raised at the site visit in terms of highway mitigation measures, paragraph 5 on page 82, and also proposed visual mitigation measures, paragraph 6 on page 82. Going on to page 83, further representations have been received since the original report was prepared, and they're set out on page 83, going over to page 84. You'll see that in detail those comments included a detailed representation on behalf of the Stowe Residents Association, which further gave further clarification to their detailed objection to the application on highway grounds. And also there was a request that a liaison committee is formed in the area, which would enable the applicant or representatives from the applicant to meet with local residents through a liaison committee to give clarification as the development progressed. So bringing that together, you'll see that the conclusions to the bottom of page 84, that there's been no recommended change to the conditions in terms of the highway position. And moving on in terms of visual mitigation, there is comment in there in terms of what is proposed, and at this time your officer's view is that there's no need to add any further requirements to the existing condition that is proposed, condition 7. And the bottom of page 85, hours of work and HGV movements. Again, it's not proposed to make any changes to the it's not recommended that there's a need for any further highway conditions to limit the days when the number of vehicle movements can basically, or to restrict the number of vehicle movements to certain days. There's not justification from a highway perspective to require that. So there's no recommendation to add a further condition around that. I've already mentioned that the Liaison Committee, and to enable that to be captured, the recommendation is that in terms of a Section 106 agreement, that there would be a further clause or obligation in that to facilitate a liaison committee. So before I bring you all to the final recommendation, can I just make you aware of the update that came around on Friday, which again set out some further representations that have been received since the publication of the supplementary report, and that's set out in the update. Essentially, the majority of the comments that have been received through that representation had already been made previously. The only further issue that had been raised that hadn't previously been identified was that a suggestion that HGV vehicles accessing the site should be equipped with satellite communications to allow for scheduling to ensure that HGVs did not pass or meet on the proposed improved section of King Street. Also there you'll see that the applicant has provided further comments in relation to public rights of way, permissive path and landscape planting. So we can quickly just go through the slides. Obviously, we saw these slides last time, and you've also now had the benefit of a site visit. So you've been able to see the site in detail for yourselves. But just for completeness, if we can go through the slides, we can go through these fairly quickly. If there's any need to go next one. I think that's probably. Maybe can we just stop on the previous one? Sorry. Further, one going further. Next one. That's it. Yeah. Just to highlight some of the issues around the visual impact of the development. So on the right-hand side of the slide, we have King Street, the eastern boundary of the application site. And you can see that they're in Block A and Block B, that the eastern section of those two blocks, it's proposed that bunds would be constructed during the initial phase-in, so that those bunds would then provide some screening of the site from King Street in terms of people, vehicles using King Street. Of all the boundaries of the site, the King Street boundary is the least, the one that benefits least from existing hedgerow and tree planting. So that's the most exposed boundary of the site. And to mitigate for those, for that, it's proposed that 3 metre high bunds are constructed to provide some visual screening from the highway. So if I can bring you back to the recommendation on page 87, is that subject to the applicant entering into a section 106 plan obligation for the obligations set out in the bullet points under A. So that's to route all HGVs travelling to and from the site, access onto King Street and the A175 except for local deliveries, to secure the curation of a community liaison meeting between local representatives and the site operator, and to provide a long-term management plan to ensure conditions after care of the restored wetland habitat. Subject to the applicant completing the plan obligation in A above, the Executive Director be authorised to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the substantive report attached to, and that should be, rather than Appendix B, that should be Appendix C, with the exception of the revised condition 13, which is set out below on page 88, revision to the wording there, that's the revision to condition 13. But other than that, the recommendation is that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions set out in the substantive report at Appendix C.
Thank you for that introduction, very much appreciated. Now, we have various speakers to this. The speakers have obviously registered to speak to the application prior to the meeting, and I'm sure they've all been made aware that they have up to 3 minutes to address the committee. I will start with the first one, which is Simon Tucker of David Tucker Associates, who's going to join us via Teams. So, Mr. Tucker, the floor is yours when you are ready, and I'll just ensure that we have a timing device, which is commonly called a mobile phone today, but it will be quite effective.
Chair, can I just check you can hear me okay before we start?
We can hear you very well.
Thank you.
So if you see me playing with my phone, you'll understand what I'm doing. So whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, my name's Simon Tucker and I'm a Director of DTA, a Traffic and Transport Planning Consultant acting for the appellant. As was discussed at the committee meeting in July, all of the relevant potential impacts of the proposed quarry have been explored in detail throughout the application. These include a detailed report of all likely impacts, including dust, noise, air quality, heritage features, landscape and hydrology. The overall conclusion of those reports, as set out in your committee report, is that the scheme is wholly acceptable and policy compliant in all aspects, subject to the usual planning conditions. Of course, the transport aspects of the site merit some more detailed comments. As you know, the scheme has been subject to a detailed transport assessment, which was scoped and agreed with the Highway Authority. But clearly the decision was deferred in July following the debate, specifically on matters of highway safety and the adequacy of the widening proposals agreed with the County Highway Authority. I listened carefully to that discussion, and I've now also seen the minutes of the site visit that you undertook and the updated notes for the committee, which reflect that. I note the condition now requires the widening of the road to at least 5.5 metres, which we support. From my perspective, I think there are 2 points to make. Firstly, it is clear that there have been accidents on King Street, and these were discussed at length last time. It is, however, important to be clear that these were accidents relating to speed and failure to give way for cars to give way lines. These are not issues which will be exacerbated by the proposed quarry. The introduction of HGV traffic will, if anything, reduce vehicle speeds on the road. Secondly, and related to the speed, is the width of the road. It is essential that a proper balance is reached between the width of the road and the scale of the development proposed. It is, of course, necessary to ensure 2 HGVs can pass. However, if the road were over-widened, that would likely result in yet higher vehicle speeds and potentially also encourage more traffic to use the route rather than the A15. On that basis, your county highway safety team considered the appropriate balance is to widen to at least 5.5 metres. I agree with that approach and consider it delivers the most appropriate form of road to accommodate the development without unintended and adverse consequences. As you know, the site went through a formal mineral plan adoption process and was found to be acceptable. We have, however, agreed the following mitigation: a routing agreement secured by Section 106, which will prevent movement through nearby villages of HGVs, a carefully designed access, which will direct all HGVs from the site to route south, the widening of King Street, as you've heard, to at least 5.5 metres. And in addition, since the deferral, as set out in the committee report, we've been asked to commit to the creation of a liaison committee. This has worked very well on numerous quarry developments I've worked on and is strongly supported by the applicant. Thank you for listening, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. You are within 3 minutes, which is excellent. Does anybody on the committee have any questions? Councillor Mrs Everton.
Thank you. I realise traffic is the big concern, but I'm just having a look at page 98 on our papers about the extraction of water. On the dust section, you put that because the material being extracted would be wet, there wouldn't be a dust issue. But on 98 with the extraction, you're talking about draining, I think it's there, you're draining the material in order to get it out more easily. And then washing it. So what happens if it does dry out, if you can't get enough water out of the, and I realise you're circulating, but if you do run short of water because some evaporates, you still need to get some out of the groundwater. How are you going to manage if it dries out? Is there a risk of that?
So firstly, the water extraction, as I understand it, is required so that you're not digging underwater, so it lowers the water table to a level that you're not actually digging sort of into water, if you like, but the water table will stay so that the material does stay damp whilst it's being extracted, and I think the resolution to that, I'm just trying to find it, is the proposed conditions in relation to just find it. Sorry, condition 32, which is on page 158 of the committee report. And that confirms that during periods of dry weather, a bowser and spray should be used to suppress dust emissions within operating areas and on internal roads. So in practical sense, if there is dry weather and the worked face does become dry, then condition 32 would be enacted, if you like, and that the operator would be required to use bowsers to make sure that the material stays wet. And as you'll see, there's a further condition 33, which effectively is a a process for a complaint if that condition isn't being adhered to.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Just the sources, you're convinced you've got enough water. I think the point is you have to get out the tap if necessary, if there's not enough there to top up.
The bowsers will have to be kept filled
thank
up,
you.
if you like, so to do that, yes. Yeah.
Certainly digging blind, as you put it, is very difficult with any sort of machinery. By scale of aggregates, it becomes very runny. So there does need to be some level of extraction. It needs to be damp, but not too damp when you're at that sort of level. Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't see any other speakers, so thank you for your comments, Mr. Tucker. I will therefore move on to Vanessa Smith, who's also joining us via Teams as an objector to the meeting. So if we can introduce Vanessa, I will restart.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you excellently, thank you.
Brilliant.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I oppose these plans on the grounds of road safety. HGVs are just over 3 metres wide at their widest point, which is their wing mirrors. On a 5.5 metre wide road, lorries will be unable to pass each other without going onto the verge. This is because 3 + 3 = 6, not 5.5. Routing all traffic in and out of the quarry via King Street to the A1175 junction means that HGVs will be passing each other many times a day on a 5.5 metre wide and 2 mile long stretch of road, mounting the verges every day. All national guidelines suggest that at least 6.3 metres is necessary for two-way HGV traffic to pass at low speed. Guidelines were followed in 2016 when CMEX opened a quarry on King Street and the road was widened to 6.3 metres from the quarry to the A1175 junction. Why are the guidelines not being followed now? I submitted a photo of King Street showing tailbacks north and south as 2 HGVs struggled to pass. Road widening by a proposed 10 centimetres to accommodate this traffic is ludicrous. Your report states that this occurred during exceptional circumstances. I disagree. Temporary closure of the A15 with traffic diverted onto King Street is not too unusual. Furthermore, lorries trying to pass each other will happen many times each day if these plans go ahead. This is because HGV traffic on King Street will increase from an average of 30 movements per day to well in excess of 100 movements per day with no site restriction. Apart from road width, as an unclassified road, King Street is used by cyclists, horse riders and walkers. These plans will make it too dangerous for them to use as there is no pavement or cycle path. Agricultural machinery in excess of 3 metres wide uses King Street on a daily basis during harvest. Anglia Water intend to lay a new Grantham to Bexwell pipeline along the very same stretch of King Street. Has this all been considered? The average speed on King Street is 57 miles per hour, with at least 35% of all drivers breaking the speed limit. I understand that it is unreasonable to expect a development to remedy existing road safety issues, but if such issues need to be remedied for the plans to be safely implemented, then this must surely be done, or else they will just exacerbate an existing problem. And whilst I appreciate that an increase in road width could result in an increase in speeding, an inadequately wide road will certainly result in verge erosion, potholes and accidents. If King Street cannot be widened, an average 40-mile-an-hour speed limit must be enforced, or can alternative access be found? It is already an unlit, undulating, ungritted, straight, fast, pothole death trap of a road with blind junctions used by hundreds of commuters, but often avoided in the winter as it is already too hazardous. I urge you to reject these plans on the grounds of road safety. Road width is inadequate and contrary to guidelines. A more than threefold increase in HGV traffic will displace other road users, and the excessive speed will result in fatalities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Do we have any questions of Vanessa, please? And I see nobody indicating at this moment, so thank you for your comments. The next person to speak will be Councillor Ashley Baxter. So I'll reset the clock, and Councillor Baxter, if you are there, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak. First of all, in terms of the admin, there's a mention in paragraph 17 and elsewhere to the Barham and Stowe Parish Council, and that doesn't actually exist. It's a parish meeting. Small point, but worth mentioning. The Liaison Committee that you're planning to set up, I would like to be involved in that, or at least kept aware of when, where and how it is meeting. I agree with what the Vanessa Smith has said already about the width of the road. The road is already a rat run. The combination of cycles, lorries and cars is not a healthy one at the moment, and the traffic needs to slow down. I understand what the gentleman applicant said about lorries potentially slowing down the traffic, but the issue of the lorries passing is an important one, and one which will either cause accidents or congestion. I agree also with Vanessa Smith's comments about the condition of the road. There are no white lines, there are no traffic markings, there are potholes, the surface is dodgy to say the least, and I think at least we should put fix it and also put the relevant road signage in place. The other thing that I thought I'd mention, I know you've been to the site, most of you, so you'll be aware of it, but if you can't make the road 6 or 6.5 meters for the whole length, then at least we could have passing places, or we could have some of the length, which would enable the lorries to wait for each other and for the lorries to get past one another. I mean, they're professional drivers, so they should know the etiquette of the road, and so it should be possible. It would be much more easy for them if parts of the road at least were made 6.5 meters, even if you can't do the whole length of the road for the sake of the hedges or the ditches or the footpaths or whatever. It would be good to make some parts of the road like that. Finally, I'd say in terms of the 106, if there is any opportunity to extend the 106 obligations to improve the services to the villages and perhaps even to the towns, we do need leisure facilities in the town, as well as the important things that are already in the 106 mentioned in the report. I think that's all I've got to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are well within time. Do we have any questions of Councillor Baxter? Seeing none, thank you. So I'll therefore move on to my next councillor, Councillor Gemma Taylor of Grateford Parish Council, who will speak to the meeting. So if you are there, yes, I can see you. So the floor is yours whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Can I just check that, Rob, that you're able to show the slides for me, please?
Yep, can you see those, Gemma?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can see the slides and we can hear you as well.
Thank you very much. Okay. Previously, councillors said this development could be here for a long time, so it's important that we get the decision right. It is not a case of not in my backyard, it is not on our conscience. It is clear to all local parish councils and over 160 local objectors that the applicant has got this really wrong. We have many concerns, but today I'll try and address the main ones. We have focused upon these as failure to make the right decision risks the safety and the lives of the people of this county. Highway safety. King Street has a collision rate higher than the national average, over 23 collisions in just the last 5 years. The applicant's transport statement includes no assessment of impacts at the main junction of King Street and the A1175, despite this being the proposed route. This is a junction with a history of collisions. Also, it shows no collisions at Stowe Road Junction, yet LCC's data shows 5 have occurred, including recent fatal collisions. We appreciate that accidents sometimes happen, but why has the applicant not assessed the risks at these junctions? How can the committee report say that the transport statement's analysis of road safety is appropriate with these flaws? Road width. See image A. This shows the current situation of just one HGV needing to straddle both lanes. Next slide. This image was taken at Stowe. It shows what happened when HGV numbers were increased along King Street because of a road closure and 2 HGVs met and had to stop to try and pass. This will clearly be more prevalent with an increase in 333% in HGV traffic. LCC say that for road designs advice, refer to the design manuals for roads and bridges, which says a road should be at least 7.3 metres wide for roads of this nature. They required CEMEX to widen King Street, and the applicant also proposes that their access road will be 7.3 metres wide. Why is LCC now saying 5.5 metres wide is wide enough for an unlit, ungritted road commonly used by cyclists and routes to schools? Both our independent road safety experts say that HGVs travelling at speeds along a road of just 5.5 metres in width could result in collisions such as head-on, overtaking slow lorries, placing a wheel in the verge leading to tipping over, mud onto the road leading to a loss of control, and braking suddenly leading to rear-end shunts. There is a reason that the guidance requires roads to be wider than 5.5 metres, and it is founded in road safety. To compromise this risks lives. Next slide. Routing. LCC say this can be managed by a 106. We've asked for a weight limit to stop vehicles taking shortcuts through villages. We and other villages already suffer from issues, so it is clear agreements don't work and this will only get worse. Next slide. Frequently, HGVs mount this footpath to negotiate this junction in Gretford. We ask LCC to state clearly today what will happen if drivers break this agreement, how many times can they do it before LCC will take enforcement action, and what will it be? Finally, we urge you, our local representatives, to listen to our issues and reject this development that is evidently inappropriate in its current location. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any questions of the speaker, please? No. Okay. Before I open it to committee, and I will remind committee it will be only those people that attended the site visit in addition to the previous report that you will be voting, have the ability to vote. I will ask the officers if they have any comments of the previous speakers, external speakers.
I don't have any comments. Will you do, John, in terms of... No.
Okay, so I'll therefore open it to committee, and who would like to be my first speaker? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Am I correct, Mr McBride, that the manuals for bridges, that is for new developments, firstly, and that it's actually the manual for streets that we have to use for existing roads that already function?
If I can ask Mr Sharp to answer that, please.
But both documents are technical manuals for design of highways. Manual for streets is generally for urban development. Design manual for roads and bridges is mainly for rural roads. You'll find many civil engineers have much to say about which is the appropriate document for design of highways, be them urban or be them rural roads. The fact remains that vehicles are the same size in both documents. I principally use manual for streets because that's what I mainly deal with for residential developments and things like that. In there, it quite clearly shows a drawing of 2 lorries passing, and 5.5 metres is sufficient width for 2 vehicles, 2 HGVs to pass. However, this is probably is in an urban situation where vehicle speeds are lower, and perhaps a little bit more, let's say, wriggle room might be required on an urban road where the vehicle mirrors, for example, stick out from the vehicle, and drivers are conscious of not wanting to collide with another vehicle's mirrors, and perhaps a 6 metre wide road might be preferable rather than the 5.5 that was recommended on our response to the planning application. I'm sure that'll be subject to a bit more discussion. I did take the trouble to go and measure some vehicles at it was GS Hughes Yard following our site meeting. I measured from the wheels on the driver's side, sorry, on the passenger side, to the wing mirrors, 2.6 metres. So if you double that, that's 5.2 metres. A 5.5 metre wide road, therefore, has a foot between the wing mirrors, and that's perhaps a little bit close for passing vehicles at speed. You're welcome to discuss it, but I've said in my response for the city, the planning officer, that perhaps the 6 metre might be appropriate. This was discussed, I know, at the previous meeting. My view is it wouldn't be any more expensive because the matter of widening the road isn't a matter of just adding 100 millimetres or 200 millimetres, whatever, beyond the existing road width. you have to dig out into the existing carriageway to provide enough room to get compaction equipment in there. So you're actually digging out more of the verge and less of the carriageway if you're digging out to provide a road that is 6 metres wide. So there's not a greater cost involved. It would provide a bit more wriggle room. As discussed by Mr Tucker, there is a trade-off between speed and road widths. You increase the road width, you increase the speed. Now, given that speed is being the critical factor on this road here, I've no wish to see vehicle speeds increase on this road here. I've discussed this at length with the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership officer, and they're very reluctant to widen the carriageway any more than 6 metres wide.
Thank you for your comments. Certainly.
Thank you. Based on your comments, I think it would be prudent of the committee if Mr McBride is in agreement that it is a condition that's possible. If the committee is agreeing, of course, that the road is widened to the 6 metres that's been mentioned. And on a further point, you mentioned local deliveries. What in the conditions can only use a different route? What constitutes a local delivery?
So if there was a need to deliver materials to Grateford Village because there was a customer in that settlement, then that was how we would, I mean, it would need to be defined in an appropriate way in a legal agreement, but that's essentially what we would be thinking, that if there was a customer in that village which required a delivery, so that's what we would be looking at.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say I think the speakers have been excellent, and I think they've clearly done a lot of research and put forward some very sensible thoughts that are well backed by the various pieces of legislation that have been mentioned and discussed and clarified by our officer, Mr Sharp. Thank you for that, who I also thought spoke very well. We did go and have a look at the site, and I think that was a really, to our credit, I think we did a good job. It was right in the start of the holidays, but we did go to the trouble of doing that. And I think that was a very good move. Thank you, Chairman. It did mean that we were able to see at first hand how the road felt. Yes, we can see measurements in metres, but actually to stand there and see the traffic coming by, and you can actually see how difficult it might be for two large lorries to pass very close to each other. And whilst we were talking about the measurement of the wing mirrors, and I would support the comment from Mr Sharp about the increased width being important, because I have seen that lorries have now started to get wider and wider mirrors because they normally can't see close behind them. And we all seen those signs, if you can't see my mirror, I can't see you. And that's why I think there's been a tendency for lorries to have wider and to make the mirrors further away. And I've seen lorries with extra mirrors. So I do think that passing at speed quite close is a very risky situation, especially when there might also be a cyclist there on the same road at the same time. And that's why I think it's really important to take the opportunity of getting this road wide enough that we can be reasonably confident that we have provided what lorries would expect when they are passing on a rural road without going on the verge. The point also I thought was very well made at the site meeting, and again by Mr Sharp just now, is about widening the road is not difficult. If you go to 6 metres, it means that if you're less, you're actually taking more of the verge. And I think that's because of the way it's got to be cut out. So it's not actually complicated, it's not expensive, it's not difficult, and it's an opportunity we should take to get that road a little wider so that cyclists and lorries can use it and will be using it. On the problem with speed, I really worry if we say that we're not going to make roads what the lorries need because we hope that they will see the roads narrow and slow down. I worry about that. Because I don't think they will. What we should be doing, I believe, is making sure that the markings are really clear, and I know we do this in many places. You've got markings on the road to demonstrate that it's very narrow. This one in places doesn't even have lines down the middle, I think, because it's not wide enough. So I think, a better marking on the roads to make it, and signs to make it perfectly clear that this road is not suitable for speed. And I think that is a way to handle speed, rather than increasing the risk of lorries passing each other at speed and cyclists, foot and horses mixed on the road. It's just too dangerous to have it less than proper width. Thank you. So I second the proposal of having the wider width that's just been made.
Thank you. Of course, we must remember that this is a planning committee, and what we're dealing with is a planning application that is in front of us. We are not a highway committee, and we cannot make judgments with regard to widths of roads, etc. People have commented about the widths of vehicles, and particularly with regard to wing mirrors. Yes, as different vehicles go through different generations, Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 or whatever, they tend to put an extra inch on the width of the vehicle and think it's not of any consequence. What I think is more of consequence, particularly with HGVs, is the fact that HGVs over time, more so with articulated lorries, are getting longer. And as such, the longer a vehicle becomes, if you put wing mirrors on it, the further you have to stick them out at the side to make you be able to see behind them. And it also creates potentially a larger blind spot. So, you know, it's the length of the vehicles, and that's certainly outside of the legislation of the County Council or anybody here that can deal with that. But I will remind the committee we are dealing with a planning application here. We are not a highways committee. So on that basis, I'm going to move on to Councillor Carrington.
Can I just clarify, if I may? Just to clarify, pardon me, what I understood was that we were talking about an amendment to the conditions so that we would ask for a wider road. That's my understanding. Sorry if I misunderstood.
At this moment in time, we are talking about the proposal, and nobody's made any proposals of any type. So to amend something would be very difficult without a proposal to discuss.
I understood I was seconding a proposal made there, but if I'm not, I'll propose it now. Thank you.
Councillor Carrington.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I should start by saying that when we met in July, I think I observed that I couldn't see there was a particularly good reason for doing a site visit, and the Chairman wisely thought there was. Well, you were dead right, and I was dead wrong, because it was an extremely valuable site visit, I thought, and I would like to thank, I'm sure all colleagues would, Mr. McBride and Mr. Sharp for accompanying us and providing so much useful information on site. I am now much more relaxed about the principle of the application, and one or two points of detail I'd like to raise. But one of the most valuable things to me on the site visit was the point made about the junctions, about half a mile on either side where the entrance would be. I think the plain English phrase was, we don't want to make a racetrack. And certainly standing at one of those junctions in a group on the edge of the carriageway, watching the traffic go by, was an absolutely informative exercise. And we clearly do not, as Mr. Sharp has said to us this morning, want to do anything which would increase speed on that road. I'm also very pleased to see in the report before us some increased planting protection. Another useful aspect of the site visit was seeing similar operations which are in situ locally, and seeing the visual protection on what is a very industrial process that can be provided by a mixture of burns and native species hedging. And I'm glad to see that was something I questioned when we were on site, and I'm very pleased to see that being beefed up in the report before us, as I am for the protection of rights of way, and indeed the creation of a liaison committee with local people, which I think is a matter of extreme importance. Chairman, on the issue of width, which I'm reluctant, I'm going to couch this in a slightly different way, basically as a question to our officers, which is where I came into this meeting. We had expressed concerns about 5.5 metres. I have to say that I was very, very persuaded about the importance of not making a racetrack when I was on site, and the impact potentially of over-widening the road on increasing speeds at junctions which are already problematic. I'm grateful to Mr. Sharp for taking the trouble to go and actually measure real vehicles and introduce real world as well as the books of guidance. So I think I would couch my issues on this as a question to both officers, is really, can they reassure us that 5.5 metres is adequate? The actual wording of the report says to a minimum of 5.5, and a question I was going to ask before we came to the meeting was, does this imply that there would be variations along the way? Would it all be one width? Exactly what width would we end up at? I have some sympathy with colleagues who would like to see 6 on the basis of Mr. Sharp's comments, but at the same time, I'm very mindful of the fact that we do not want to make a racetrack, and that those two junctions clearly, as we've heard from local residents, have their own dangers. Chairman, I conclude with 2 comments. One, if I remember the report from early July correctly, this is an allocated site. The principle of developing this for minerals extraction is established, and there are significant economic benefits to this activity. So we are only talking about mitigation. And the final thing I would say is to quote a line from the report, which was actually alluded to by one of our speakers earlier, which is that one development cannot be expected, reasonably expected, to solve all the existing problems on this road. It just don't work like that. That is not possible. So with those comments in mind, Chairman, I'd love to hear a little more from our officers. Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. McBride first, please.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. I'll pick up on the allocated site issue. So yes, it is an allocated site. It is in the site location document from 2017 as an allocated site, so that is true. In terms of landscaping, at the moment in the report we've identified that there is potential for further advanced landscaping before the sort of main extraction takes place, but we haven't recommended an amendment to its condition 7, which is the landscaping condition, which would need to be amended if committee feel that there is a need for more than just what is currently proposed for landscaping. So the applicant has identified a willingness to provide additional upfront landscaping. We've confirmed with the Environment Agency that there is sufficient width between the bund and the drain to do that. So it's really a decision for the committee. If the committee feel that there is that they want to see a enhanced landscaping proposal, then we need a resolution for condition 7 to be amended to do that. So that's what we would need from the committee. I'll leave Mr. Sharp to comment on the width, highway width issue.
Either would be preferable. As I mentioned before, there is a trade-off between sort of the road width and the speed. The 5.5 metres wide is sufficient, as I said before, for 2 vehicles to pass. You have to remember that commercial vehicles, HGVs, are already using these roads. That they're not being introduced fresh onto these roads. Vehicles are going along here, and I think had there been a problem, we'd have seen more of that in accident reports and the like. Yes, I have gone along with the 5.5 metres because the application was subject to pre-application discussions with the applicants and the highway and the planning authority and the highway authority. And in fact, it's my colleague who would advise the 5.5 metres wide, and that has been carried forward through in my comments. As I said, the 6 metres gives a little bit more wriggle room. The drivers perhaps be less likely to slow down if they knew they could get past each other. So both would work. The 5.5 is wide enough. 6 metres, in my opinion, would be preferable over the length we're talking about. Either or, I'm afraid. I don't have a fixed answer. There is a trade-off, one against the other. The issue along this road in terms of accident has been predominantly speed and failure to look properly at junctions. The fact that there are going to be more lorries on here shouldn't, in theory, increase that. As Mr. Tucker has said, vehicles travelling on the road here will effectively slow down some of the speeds along that road there. people are using that road, the word wrap-round was used, people are using this road to get between the A15 and the 1175. And if they're using that road, perhaps they're going short of time and want to go faster. The fact that there are going to be more vehicles on here, more HGVs, may put more vehicles onto the A15. It's down to people's preference rather than a mathematical calculation, as always. It's not an exact science. The road widths, the vehicle widths are exact science. They are what they are. But people's behaviour is something we can't legislate against.
Thank you very much for the comments, officers. My feel is that with regard to this application, I am happy to accept it as it is printed with the recommendation on page 81, the executive summary, and also with the further full recommendations on 87. So I'm quite happy to propose the report, but with the amendment to recommendation B, which states that the substantive report as attached in Appendix B is accepted. It should be C. So we do need to make that modification. I do have a couple of other speakers though. Councillor Pepper first.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Oh boy, am I pleased I recommended a site visit on this one, Chairman. It's been a huge benefit and to get us all together and to talk about it, see it on site properly. Taking on board all the comments from the highways officer, one thing that stuck in my mind more than anything was that it would be beneficial, I don't think that's the exact word, but his preference, I think was the word, to have it 6 metres, yeah. And he also told us there'd be no more or very little work included in that. And, you know, we're arguing there between 5.5 metres and 6 metres. That's 250 millimetres, 10 inches either side of the road. About the width of that iPad, which is really neither here or there. And I don't believe it would increase the speed that much, particularly if we went for lineage, centre lineage, and also lineage down the sides as well. Because that would have, in effect, even though the road would be 3 metres each side, it would have the effect with a white line down there of actually narrowing it a bit, but it wouldn't in practice be narrowed. So I think it's Councillor Overton who moved an amendment to make it 6 metres, and I'm happy to second that, Chairman.
Right, that's with regard to the road width or the report, amending the entire report and to go for 6 metres. Okay, so we'll take that as an amendment because Mr McBride.
Yeah, just for, I suppose, just maybe to help for a point of clarity. I mean, what we're talking about is condition 13. At the moment, condition 13 is worded to recommend 5.5 metres. The alternative suggested by Councillor Pepper and Councillor Mrs Overton that it should be 6 metres. So that would be the alternative proposal, that that condition is amended to 6 metres rather than as it currently stands at 5.5.
Thank you for the mic. So we'll take that it is Councillor Overton that has proposed the recommendation to have a 6 metre width. I've got you in line for speaking next. I've got you in line next, Councillor Smith. So if you'd like to speak, please.
Thank you. I don't know if I'd made myself clear, Chairman, for which I apologise. I'd formally proposed that earlier, so I do apologise if I hadn't made that clear. But no, I would certainly support Councillor Pepper's. Thank him for supporting the motion and the recommendation I made to make the road wider to 6 metres.
Right, you weren't fully clear earlier on, I don't think to me, and that's the reason why I pulled Councillor Overton up with regard to talking about highways issues, hence the reason why we hadn't got a proposal for the report. Now I have a proposal for a report in the format of Councillor Mrs Overton saying that she had intended to propose the report at 6 metres on condition 13, and Councillor Pepper is seconding that. That is the alternate proposal I will have. Currently I have proposed the report as printed with regard to the with regard to it as printed, but with the change in Appendix B to Appendix C, and I would assume that your proposal would also be the same. Yes, because otherwise it would refer to the it would refer to the wrong appendices, yes. So therefore, unless somebody doesn't second my proposal, the report as printed, that will fall. Legal is indicating. Martha.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just to remind members that obviously Mr McBride also mentioned perhaps whether members needed to discuss and consider condition 7 in relation to an enhanced landscaping scheme and whether the proposal on the table currently encompasses that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to those who've discussed and worked on that landscaping condition, and I think it would be very sensible to do the enhanced scheme as suggested today. Thank you. So I would like to include that in the proposal.
Councillor Pepper is nodding the same. Do we have any further speakers? I currently have one recommendation, and that is the only one recommendation that is fully supported, and that is the recommendation by Councillor Mrs Overton. I have no further speakers, so therefore I'll offer it to the meeting that the proposal is that, proposed by Councillor Mrs Overton, seconded by Councillor Pepper, that condition 13 is amended to be 6 metres wide and condition 7 is acceptable. Okay.
Anyone is enhanced.
Thank you. So we cover it from there, and that is also taking into account that the appendices referred to in item B on page 87 is appendix C and not appendix B. All in favour of that, please show now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Those against? Abstentions? 1. Okay, so therefore that is granted with those amendments to condition, and that is obviously with the section 106 and everything else to be put into place at that point. Okay, seeing no further business, I'd like to thank you all. I'd particularly like to thank Mr Sharp, who's been in the hot seat for a little while, and we did make him wander across the road with a tape measure and bits and pieces, so it's very much appreciated. We don't normally see you at planning committee. I'm sure it's been an interesting experience. I don't know if it's been enjoyable for you, but I'd particularly like to thank you. I'd like to thank all the officers for the effort they've put into the work, and we'll go forwards from there. Otherwise, to everyone else, safe journey home, and thank you all for attending. I will point out that 1 or 2 of the up-and-coming planning committees may not be within the council chamber. We have a couple of interesting committees, a couple of interesting reports coming forwards, and in line with what we've done previously, we might be using an alternate meeting room, and it may not be in Lincoln based upon what the planning applications are. So I'll leave that one and let you come back to me with bated breath. So don't always assume that we'll meet in the council chamber.